All right. Welcome back, everybody. We've got another 20-minute pop-up here. Super excited. Got my good friend Matt Viebrock here. And we are going to talk about the number one reason that you are not making as much money as you should in your real estate business. And we had a little chat ahead of time, and I cannot tell you how much I agree with this. So, Matt, welcome. We're going to jump right into it. 20 minutes. Let's go. Tell us
Let's
about
do
it.
it, man. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, so thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
Yeah, number one reason you're wasting time on doing stuff that you should not be doing. That's
Oh
it.
my God. That's the bane of every hustler, entrepreneur, wholesaler's existence, right?
Yeah, exactly. So one of the things we always tell our clients is if you're doing, less than I'd say $500 an hour tasks in your business, then
Mhm.
you should be delegating this to somebody else, right? So
Got it.
that's exactly what we're trying to do.
So I've read like Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. I've been doing this for 22 years. I've heard that over and over and over again. But man, like break it down so that like a nitwit like me can understand that. Like what should I be doing? What shouldn't I be doing? Because it feels like in the beginning, right? When you're trying to get your business up off the ground, like I've got to do everything, right?
Yep.
I've got to do all the work. Nobody's as smart as me. Nobody works as hard as me. Blah, 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 all that crazy stuff.
Well, I'll tell you the number one thing to do, and Dan Martell's book "Buy Back Your Time" is one of my absolute favorites.
Love
It's a
it.
game changer. If nobody's ever read that before, you got to go pick it up
Mhm.
today. It's absolute life changer right there. I mean, the number one thing it's going to come down to is you have to start defining what it is you're spending your time on first, right?
Mhm.
So define what you're spending your time on, and then you've got to break it down into a couple different ways, right? So a couple of things that Dan talks about in his book is doing what's called an energy audit. And then
Mhm.
also you want to look at, is this going to be a core function of the business, right? So when I say core function, we're talking about like, is this something like if I'm doing it and if it stops getting done, the business shuts down, right?
Mm.
Or is this just a
Yeah.
business task or is it a personal task, right? And then you want to essentially break down how many hours you're working on that thing, and then you assign a dollar per hour value to it. It's very simple.
Okay.
So very
So
simple.
let's give us an example. I think most of our people that are watching this are probably, real estate investors. A lot of them are maybe wholesalers or rehabbers. Like, what are some real life examples of what we're talking about here, so we can just really
Yeah.
bring it down to them?
Well, let's talk about it real quick. Can I go share my screen real quick? Would they see that if I do
Mhm.
it? Awesome. Let's do that
Yeah,
real
for
fast.
sure.
So I'm going to show you guys an example of one of my clients that we work with. His name is Mitch. This guy's running $1 million a year wholesaling business as it is. So I don't know if you
Okay.
guys can see this okay, but
Yeah, yeah.
let me zoom in here just a hair.
Thank you.
So one of the things that
Even with my glasses, I can't see it. So go
yeah,
ahead.
you're good. So the first thing you would do is you want to start off with what's called a time audit, right? So Dan Martell talks about in that book that you want to do at least a 14-day time study. So I
Ooh,
know it sounds like a pain in the
sounds
butt to
horrible,
do.
Matt. Matt, it sounds
And
terrible to do
no, I
this.
know it's it's brutal initially when you start. I'm not gonna lie, right? But I will tell you that as you start to do all these things, it's the little wins you're gonna be stacking on top of each other, right?
Okay.
So as you're going through this, you just track what you do on a 15-minute basis. That's it. So and if you do something that you're more than one thing during a 15-minute time frame, make a little note and say, okay, it took me 2 minutes to do this. It took me,
Yeah.
5 minutes to do this, whatever. So that way we can have a really accurate measure of what's going on. But the most important thing to look at here is what we call two things: the energy audit and then the dollar per hour value with that, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about energy audit for a second. So we all have a spot in our lives where we can focus in our genius zone, is what I like to call it, right? So you
Right.
guys have probably heard that before. And so not everybody's good at everything. And like you mentioned, actually, David, is like if you want something done right, you gotta do it by
Yeah, you gotta do
yourself,
it
right?
yourself, right? And
Exactly.
and I've talked about this a million times. When I started out, I
Yep.
I wore the badge of, very proudly, the badge of honor of I'm a control freak and I just have to do
Hmm.
everything myself. And it was absolute nonsense.
100% nonsense. And the thing is like you really need to focus on the things that you're good at and let other people do what they're good at, right? So if you think about it, the way that I like to explain to our clients is if you are trying to do something you're not good at, you're robbing somebody else of the opportunity
Mhm.
to do something that they love, right? So, and that way you can also be making a ton more money when you're focusing on your genius zone.
Yeah.
So, you're focusing on what your energy is because we all have a certain amount of energy through during the day, right? Like for me, I know I'm
Mhm.
only good from about 10 a.m. until about 2 p.m. and then I'm done. I call it quits at the end of the day.
Yeah, dude.
Like,
Yeah. I tell people
yeah,
I don't really peak until
yep,
about 11:30, and then it's
yep,
down at 1 o'clock. It's a
yep.
very small window of where I'm pumped up.
Yeah. So, and during that time, if we're all limited on the amount of time that we have in order to get the things done that need to get done, we need to be focused on the highest leverage activities we possibly can, right?
Mhm.
So a huge part of that is focus on the energy that you have in this. So when you're doing this time study, you want to rank each one of those things that you're doing on, let's say a one is that you love it, you're great at that's your genius zone, right?
Yeah.
Two is you like it, you're good at it, it's just work, right? And a three is you don't like it, but you're okay at it. So think about like email is a perfect example, right? Or managing your
Sure.
computer. And a four is just like you don't like it and you're not good at it. We call that the incompetent zone. Not to say that you're incompetent or anything like that, but it's something to keep in mind, right?
Yeah.
So then the other part of it is you want to assign a dollar per hour value to it, right? So the easiest
Mm.
way, a lot of people get a lot really confused in terms of, well, how much should I assign to each one of these different things?
Yeah.
It's very simple. It comes down to what would you have pay somebody else to do in the business, and then how much. The way I look at it is that how much revenue can this task generate for my business, right?
Interesting.
So if I look at it from the standpoint of that, of how much revenue it's going to drive, a $10 an hour task is something a virtual assistant can do. $30 executive assistant, a work task might be 100. Management, I would also include sales in here as well. Would be something that's like a $500 an hour task. And then if you're at that if you're doing strategy and you're working on your business, that's a $5,000 an hour task, right? So we want to have you focusing on as much as possible on being in that management zone and $5,000 an hour tasks, right?
Yeah.
So in strategy. So that's really all you do. And you just do that for 14 days. I know it's tedious, but if you use the spreadsheet to do it, it'll make things so much simpler. And then once you're done, all you do is you come over here and in fact, I wouldn't do this. I would have my virtual assistant take everything I did on that time study and put it over here on this sheet. Says
Mhm.
all the tasks that I'm doing. They write it down, and then you're just sorting it by, okay, where's my top energy level stuff I need to be doing, right? So we want to keep the ones and the twos that in your wheelhouse of the things you need to be doing. Anything that's a three or a four, we want to get that off your plate, right? And then right here, you can see we just did business and core, type of stuff that needed to get.
Mhm.
But I 100% recommend putting your personal tasks on here as well. Okay,
Really? Okay.
100%
I think that would be
because
counterintuitive. Most people would think this is a work
no,
thing. Let me not do that.
no, I want you putting your personal on here too, because if you're before the level of, if you're not making at least $300,000 a year in your business, you should at least have a virtual assistant who's helping you out with like minimal tasks and
Yeah.
easy stuff, right? Just to take some of the workload off your plate. But once
Mhm.
you get to that $300,000 a year level, your business should be able to start sustaining itself and be able to afford you bringing on a US based executive assistant. Now, that
Right.
executive assistant, I actually turn them into my personal assistant as well,
Right.
right? So I want all these personal tasks on here because I mean
Mhm.
it's your life, so this could be your entire life. You basically can outsource a lot of it. It's pretty cool.
Um,
So
cool. I'm gonna make a note because I want to come back to that here in a little
yeah,
bit.
yeah. So the other part of it is you're going to put down what that task is, and you want to write down what the department is, how much time it took you to do it, and is there an SOP for this task? Yes or no? And
Mm,
SOP stands for standard operating procedure.
right.
Okay.
Got it.
Then you just put that dollar per hour value for it, and it actually will tell you what's the value creation that you have given to your company by doing that task, right?
Hmm.
So then we took from Dan Martell's book, he calls it what's called the drip matrix.
Yeah.
So with that, you probably know this, David, but so he talks about your production zone, your
Right.
replacement, delegation, and then
Mhm.
investment. So the 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 D is the D and the I. The I is not really going to show up on here except for the personal task for the most part. But if it's something that's in your production zone, that's the stuff you want to keep, right?
Yeah.
The cool thing about this is it'll, based on what you put on here for your energy audit and the dollar per hour, it'll tell you
Yeah.
exactly where it needs to fall in the drip matrix. Now here's the kicker. When you figure all this stuff out, you want to make sure you're putting who's the future owner of this, if it's something that's going to be on the replacement or the delegation quadrant. Okay. So that's as simple as it gets, right? And as you can see up here, what it's going to tell you is like, okay, how many days we do our time study, and then based on everything that's on here, what's the average value per hour we created for the company? What's the
Mhm.
total value created on a daily basis over five, like in a working week? And then yearly, this is the one that most people care about, is how much is we're generating for the company. When we did this for my client, it actually almost came out exactly to this number. It
Really?
was crazy. So the cool part about it was we figured, okay, so he's working 27.3 hours a week in his business when he was doing this. And now we call Dan talks about figuring out what's your buyback rate, right? So the buyback rate is something like this is what you want to be able, this is what you can afford to pay other people on your team, and you can split this up between multiple different people or one person, whatever it might be. And this is how much you have to afford to pay other people, right? So now that you've got all your tasks listed out, you come over here, you put them on the tasks that you're going to keep. Like we said, everything that's a one or a two. Check this out, David. Look at what his dollar per hour value went up to just by doing that.
Oh, wow.
He was at $804.
Yeah.
Now he's up to 1152,
Mm,
and now his total yearly value creation went down a little bit, but look how much time he saved.
right.
He went from 27.3 to 9 hours a week in his business.
Hmm.
So it's nuts when you look at this way. And
Wow.
now, when you give this to an executive assistant or a virtual assistant to work on, and you put all the stuff on the list of the tasks that are getting delegated, now
Mhm.
it's their job to go and create all the SOPs. And then we actually put all the SOPs on this SOP sheet. And then that person
Mhm.
then becomes the SOP champion, is what we call it, who's
Right.
now in charge of actually coming up with it, managing it.
Mhm.
And we use something called the RACI model to actually make sure who's responsible for it, who's going to be
Got it.
accountable, who needs to be consulted, who needs to be informed.
Nice. Okay, let's talk about this. So
Yeah.
I think that's amazing. So the people watching this or who are at all different levels, like Matt, when do I start this? Like I haven't done my first deal yet. Should I be doing this? Man, I'm doing 5 deals a month. Should I be doing this? Like, at what point does somebody say, "Hey, I need to start thinking about this"?
Yeah, I would start thinking about it immediately, right?
Okay.
Especially any task that you're doing that you hate doing needs to go on this list, and you need to figure out how we can delegate that to somebody else. I don't care
Okay.
if it's personal, I don't care if it's a business task, whatever, start now, right? The
Yeah.
sooner you start, this will help you build that foundation.
I can tell you also Dan's book, I read it a little over a year ago, absolutely changed my life. But I have, really, she's a quasi personal assistant. We call her kind of she's my house manager. She runs over, lets my dogs out every day. She does my
Yep.
laundry, picks up dry cleaning, all of those things, meal preps for me, just kind of runs around and does that. And that frees up so much of my time to make sure that
Mhm.
I'm here in my office, you know, talking to our partners around the country and making sure that I'm here with my team. So that has been invaluable. And it's in the big scheme of things, what I pay is nothing, for that. But what is the difference between you mentioned this earlier, a personal assistant and an executive assistant? Because I do think they're a little bit different.
Yeah, when you're starting off, you can have them kind of be both, because a lot of people will they don't have a lot to do necessarily in the business when they're
Yeah.
first getting started. But that's what I'm saying is, you can take, if you're starting now and you put those personal
Mhm.
tasks on here, you can divvy some of that stuff up, right?
Yeah.
So, and I would actually call them like your life assistant, probably initially to start, right?
Yeah.
So, but eventually, the goal of having an executive assistant is not to have them in that role for a long time, right? In
Mm,
fact, what we do is we look at the executive assistant as that's your future second in command, right? So,
interesting.
and I don't like to use titles like
Yeah.
COO or operations manager or anything like that, because that comes with a lot of like salary creep and things like that as
Yeah.
well. So we just use the term second in command. And I think
Mhm.
the best companies that I've seen and that we've worked with are the ones where they groomed that executive assistant up to becoming eventually somebody who's going to be running a team and then running
Mm.
the company over time, right? Because
Really?
as we get into this, we all got into business to go sit on a beach and drink Mai Tais,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So the only way you do that is having other people that are managing the
Right.
systems and the processes and things like that. So that EA needs to be that person. So the
Nice.
differences between an EA and a personal assistant, initially there's not much, right?
Okay.
So, but as you start to grow the company, they can grow more into focusing on certain key areas of the business.
Nice.
And then they move into the executive assistant
Yeah,
role.
and I know some people, we have some mutual friends, like, I know one guy, he's got, like, 4 executive assistants, and they all do kind of different things, but he calls them
Yeah.
all executive assistants. So I think that's fantastic.
Yep.
I do think 100% this is the only way to scale, right?
Yep.
This is the pathway if you wanna grow your business, because again, as the entrepreneur, the investor, the wholesaler, the business owner, I can't do everything. No matter how
Mhm.
delusional I was, and I will use me as an example, like I was that guy working 14, 15 hours a day, 6, 7 days, 6 days a week, and Sundays, I did a half day of 8, because I could do 8 standing
Mhm.
on my head. It didn't feel like anything. But that really stunted my growth because I was that person. And
Yeah.
we talk about this a lot with transaction coordination, right? Why you need to start to outsource some of these things to
Mhm.
some people who are professionals. Do you see a big difference between, like, maybe virtual assistant EAs US based, EAs, executive assistants, and then like in person, sits in the next office from you or, works out of the same building?
Huge difference. Absolutely huge difference.
Yeah.
I think everybody starting off should, as soon as you can afford to pay, at least for a virtual assistant,
Hmm.
you should get one as soon as possible. Ideally,
Okay.
somebody from like the Philippines or something like that who speaks really good English and they
Right.
understand the culture and things like that.
Hmm.
But the goal of that virtual assistant is not to become the executive assistant for you in the long run, because I do want somebody who's going to be US
Hmm.
based, who can be local to where you're at, who can
Nice.
meet with you on a regular basis. I'm a huge fan. Like, I used to be a huge fan of like doing everything virtually, especially during COVID and stuff like that. And now I've completely swung the pendulum back in the other direction.
I'm that guy, man, and I am the
Yeah,
most unpopular guy in my office because all of our people here work in office. In fact, we're moving to a bigger office because
yeah,
we can't house everybody.
yeah,
But I just think there's something to be said for being in person, especially if there's ever
yeah,
any kind of collaboration that needs to be done. Like
yeah.
I cannot do that effectively over Zoom. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work, and I'll fight anybody on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing. Like, I'm definitely a hybrid kind of a role, but I
Hmm.
think like the team needs to be able to get together at
Yeah.
least a couple times a quarter,
Hmm.
ideally. To really collaborate, and
Yeah.
you miss out on a lot of that culture, right?
Yeah.
But the point being was with a virtual assistant versus an EA, that virtual assistant that you bring on initially, that's going to become the assistant to your executive assistant, because they're
Mm.
already going to have a lot
Yeah.
of the knowledge about what's going on in your company, and they can help shortcut your executive assistant's learning curve by a lot. And then that
Right.
way they can delegate a lot of that much smaller dollar priorities out stuff to
Mhm.
them. So that way they can focus on the higher level stuff that you've assigned to them as well.
Cool. Last question for you that I
Yeah,
really want to talk about. Do you see any dangers in people who try to outsource too quickly and push these tasks out to other people?
100%.
Okay. That was a loaded
100%.
question because I know the answer there, but
Yeah,
because I
yeah.
see it over and over and over again.
Yeah. Stay in your lane, focus on revenue in first position is absolutely number one. Everything else can fall by the wayside. If all you got from this call today was if you go get something like Loom, or even if you use Google Meet, and anytime you do something more than once and you record it and then
Yeah.
just put it in a Google Drive folder, and then let your virtual assistant or your EA, if you in the future, go ahead and coalesce all that data and create that SOP playbook for you. But at
Right.
least getting it out of your brain and into some sort of recording
Yeah.
is super helpful. But just stay focused on what you need to do, and that's go make money and go make
Yeah.
sales happen.
I was so hesitant to do that in the early days, and even my brother tried to get me to do it, and I didn't. I'm like, why do I want to get a VA to do this? I can just do it myself faster, than
Hmm.
training them, and then they're going to leave. Like it was just the dumbest thing ever. But kind of what I'm speaking about there is I know it's very cool and very fashionable, like
Yeah,
to outsource and to bring people in. And we go to these masterminds, we're all the same ones, and people are like, you got to get in the owner's box and you got to be over here and let the other people run the business. And I've seen that time and time again in our business.
yeah,
People run their business into the wall because they don't keep their fingers on what's going on. They don't keep their
yeah.
fingers on the pulse. And again, like I said, I've just seen that happen so many times.
Business is a marathon. It's not a
Yeah.
sprint. So take your time, do the right steps, and you're going to be
Yeah.
in great shape. So,
Yeah, and it takes time to find those people where,
hmm,
I'm at a point in my business where I can step away and leave for a month and things will still run.
yeah,
But it took me, I've been doing this for 22 years too, and it takes
yeah,
time to find those people who believe in the vision, they're on the mission with you, they understand where you're going, and you can start to put those people in place.
absolutely.
It's cool, man. I went a little bit longer than I thought, but tell me, like, this is amazing. How do people get a hold of you if they want some guidance? I'm imagine,
Yeah.
you guys can help them set this up.
Yep, just go book a free strategy call with us. If you just go to easyrei.letsgrowcoo.com. So
Okay.
that's easyrei.letsgrowcoo.com. Just
Nice.
fill out the form there, book a strategy time, and then my team is actually going to reach out to you to schedule the time directly on my calendar. You'll be talking directly with me. So,
Mhm.
and we do it for a 30-minute time block, and
Nice.
we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And social media, where can they find you real fast?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, so if you just look up letsgrowcoo.com and Instagram as well. So our social media game is not quite where we want it to be, but we're getting
Mhm.
there. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Matt, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate
absolutely.
you and all the
Appreciate
the
it.
just the bombs that you dropped here.